Our next candidate is Kara Hall. Kara, please introduce yourself.
My name is Kara Hall, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm located in Las Vegas. Before joining DSA, I did extensive community organizing work, particularly around feminist issues such as reproductive justice and gender violence. I'm a former special education teacher, where I was an active member of my local teachers union, and I'm a registered behavior technician for children with autism. I joined DSA in June of 2019, which is when I really found my political home. I became secretary in October of 2019, and I served as co-chair from February 2020 until my term ended this past month. Since I've been in chapter leadership, I've primarily focused on building community coalitions and recruitment within the chapter. The Las Vegas chapter grew by over 156% in 2020, and I was part of the leadership team who put massive effort into preparing for and locking in the tremendous Bernie 2020 caucus win for Nevada. Catapulting off that electoral success, I helped lead LVDSA to coordinate a state of leftists to take over every officer seat in both the county and state Democratic Party elections. In addition, I've worked on labor and mutual aid projects and campaigns and pushing my chapter to engage nationally in the PRO Act. In addition to my chapter work, I've also been an active leader in national DSA for the past year. I helped lead the DSA 100K recruitment drive as part of the Growth and Development Committee's recruitment subcommittee, where I also lead national Q&A calls and help facilitate national term on the steering committee of the Socialist Feminist National Working Group.
Kara, what do you think the future of DSA is, and how do we get there?
Well, I truly believe in a mass movement theory of power, and I believe that DSA needs to build into a mass organization that's big enough to contest power at every level, whether it's local, statewide, regional, or through federal campaigns. We need to be organized enough to mobilize people into arenas of struggle and grounded enough that we're able to choose our battles tactfully, be they electoral, in the labor tenant fields, or around specific national campaigns. We don't have time to waste. The planet's dying and we have a world to win. It is both a moral and existential necessity. We're at a crisis point right now. COVID continues while many of our most vulnerable frontline and working class communities struggle to recover. Climate crises are looming over the Western US and the Gulf Coast. Republicans are pushing hateful and anti-democratic legislation through every state house in the country, and the working class is poorer and more demoralized than it has been in generations. The election of Biden brought with it the brunchification of the center Dem electorate, and if we do not get people organized quickly, we're going to lose a generational battle, one we simply can't afford. The purpose of any socialist organization in the contemporary US must be to recruit millions of working class people into an organized force that is able to contest power on multiple fronts, ultimately leading the shift of power away from capital and toward the multiracial, multi-generational working class. Capitalism relies on the exploitation of the many to benefit the few, and with a mass movement, together we can demand what we know is possible, a better world.
If elected to the NPC, what goals would you have for your 2-year term?
Well, for one, if our organizing is not accessible to the full scope of the working class, it's not socialist organizing. This includes disability justice, language justice, safety for those with marginalized identities, and accessibility for people who represent the full scope: parents, seniors, people who work odd or intense hours, and people with transportation access issues. It is incumbent upon the national organization to assist chapters in creating accessible organizing spaces and finding new ways to reach people for whom current spaces are inaccessible. I also want to help create regional and state formations. We tend to agree that our movement can't be successful in the long term if we're only building a serious political force in large urban areas or only in coastal cities. Despite this general agreement, many of our smaller and often don't get the support they need, and many of our thousands of at-large members have no relationships in the national organization whatsoever. State and regional formations would cover a much wider jurisdiction than any one local and would enfranchise many more members who simply don't have chapters or OCs they can engage in. These formations will allow us to pool resources among chapters and make space for outreach into communities that have previously been unreachable at scale. Another goal is to provide additional support and resources to our YDSA comrades. DSA must stop treating YDSA as if it's a completely separate organization. High schools and colleges are both a fertile recruiting ground and an under-supported site of struggle for the working class. Student body organizations are literally encouraged at most schools, and therefore YDSA chapters should be well supported by national so they can rapidly train organizers and offer a pipeline into local DSA work upon graduation. Additionally, we need a dedicated campaign to specifically organize community colleges, HBCUs, and trade schools, where student bodies are more broadly representative of the working class. Next, our failure to develop DSA into a welcoming space for all members of the working class has the potential to doom our shared political project. In order to do this, we must reform our grievance process. Interpersonal harms have the potential to drastically change, alter, and outright destroy our movement's work. In order to move forward toward a just and safe society, we must not replicate the harms that exist in our current culture of punishment, disenfranchising survivors, expressing uneven and unjust ways to approach the harms, and sometimes not handling the issues at all. Nationally, our organization has at times fumbled with dealing with issues at varying degrees, from abuse and harassment to political disagreements. As one of the authors of Resolution 28, Building Transformative Justice Through a National Committee of Grievance Officers, I believe by passing this, we can begin taking the right step forward for grievance reform in DSA. Other goals include continuing the work of the International Committee, including solidarity with mass movements across the globe and building relationships with leftist parties in the Global South, bringing back the National Activist Conference, and continuing to engage in intentional recruitment and small and rural chapter support.
You propose state formations as a potential answer to improve our organization. How would you help us approach this question of establishing state formations?
I think we've already seen some of their own. We have a lot of chapters that came together in California and other places to try to start doing these statewide campaigns. And I think being able to nationally offer those chapters support and what that means, how to do that, and even getting in contact with each other is crucial. Sometimes it's hard to just find a way to even get in touch with another chapter. In Nevada, I only have one other chapter here, and sometimes it's still hard to get a hold of them. I can't even imagine what it's like for those in California. I think that through things like the GDC, Growth and Development Committee, we can help to be able to kind of give that support to connect one another and offer resources. We don't have to keep reinventing the wheel every time we start a new chapter or an OC, when we have these big successful chapters that already have this resources on hand. So I think that we should, take a look at what places like California have done to bring that together, the bylaws they've created, and be able to support them on a national level.
Thanks, Kara. Next question. While considering our organization's limited resources, how would you approach the issue of prioritizing the work that the NPC is responsible for?
DSA's greatest resource is our members, and I think we need to do a better job at taking advantage of this. This means we must do better when it comes to leadership development, training, and offering resources to those chapters and members who need it. If you look around at national committees within DSA, they tend to be made up of the same small group of members who are typically in local leadership roles as well, and often at capacity or with limited bandwidth. For an organization of almost 100,000 members, especially with limited resources, it's imperative that we start focusing on leadership development at all levels and also help members to understand what that means so they can begin to develop others. The DSA 100K drive last fall was a tremendous success, and we should continue working on intentional recruitment, including regular recruitment drives and dues drives for members if we really want to help expand our resources. I do, however, recognize that we can't solve the problem of capacity exclusively by recruiting or making it easier to pay higher dues, though. And on the NPC, I'll have to work with my comrades to make some tough decisions. In general, I think the best method is to prioritize work based on what will effectively move us toward winning socialism in the United States as quickly as possible. We'll need to constantly be measuring our successes, analyzing what's working and what isn't, prioritizing campaigns that offer significant recruitment and leadership development opportunities, and putting resources into the priorities that are moving forward in the most generative ways. It's hard to say in advance what these will be because conditions are constantly changing, but I do believe that with thoughtful, cautious analysis, the decisions should be clear, if not necessarily easy.
You express a value in leadership development. How would you help further DSA's leadership development as an NPC member?
I'd like to see something built out within the Growth and Development Committee. Right now, the Growth and Development Committee has 4 subcommittees: recruitment, retention, training, and mentorship. Training often offers all different kinds of trainings for chapter leaders and other members. And I think that expanding that to talk about leadership development and what that means for chapter leaders especially would be crucial. Not to mention mentorship. We have right now mentors that they go on and they mentor an entire chapter. But I would like to see some kind of program where people can sign up to both be mentors and to have a mentor on an individual basis so that we can help build up some of those leaders. I know so many local leaders who are incredibly strong. And when I try to encourage them to do national work, they kind of shy away or don't think that they're ready or don't feel like they are prepared to do that on a larger scale. And I think even just having to encourage them, to talk them through it, and to teach lessons learned could really help just in doing that. I noticed that in my chapter, I've had a lot of positive feedback from newer members and quieter members and those who really appreciate someone going to them and encouraging them to step up into more of a leadership role when they didn't think that they were necessarily ready at first.
Thanks, Kara. Now, the question now: how will you work with fellow leaders who you may not always agree with?
Well, I truly believe in and love the big tent nature of DSA and welcome spaces for different organizing opinions and strategies. I think that chapters and national bodies should reflect the diversity of thought of our members in a comradely, productive, and democratic way. I want to help make sure everyone's voices are heard and people's issues are acknowledged. As a leader at both a local level and with national bodies, I've worked well with people across the left spectrum, from anarchists to social democrats, and I have found valuable contributions from them all across the board. Of course, that doesn't mean that everyone agrees on everything, but good camaraderie debate is fundamental to our socialist project. And when we keep our shared goals at the forefront, we really can accomplish huge things. I do think it's important that the democratic will of the membership always be prioritized. So if, for example, a faction, even one that I agree with on some or all things, is pushing back against a democratically chosen priority, it'll be my job as an NPC member to defend that priority. However, in general, factionalism is something that must be overcome at the governing level of the organization. The NPC should be modeling camaraderie disagreement for the org as a whole, which includes trust, transparency surrounding disagreements, and regular and clear communication at every level. Again, of course, we all have our tendencies, which we have arrived at through some combination of study and lived experiences, but those tendencies do not need to divide us and can, in fact, be a source of strength, as they give us a variety of options and opinions to evaluate in any given situation. We're in this together, and we all bring something to the table. I've been in leadership locally for the past 2 years, and I can definitely say that I haven't always agreed with everyone else in leadership while in those roles. However, I gave my opinion, they gave theirs. We listened to one another, we compromised where we could, and where we couldn't, we took a vote. I think there's a reason that there are 18 people on the NPC, and I think that being democratic and respecting the result of things when they arise is important. And it's one of our core tenets of being democratic socialists. But at the end of the day, we can all learn valuable things from one another, and we all have something unique to bring to the table. It's important to develop a culture where we take advantage of that as a positive thing when we don't always agree, rather than a negative one.
Kara, what do you think is important for delegates to consider about your candidacy?
I spent the last 2 years in chapter leadership, and I've helped transform my chapter into a force locally. Between quadrupling our membership, building coalitions with other groups and organizations in the community, and taking on real power and winning, I've helped Las Vegas DSA to make real material differences in our community. I want to take the experiences I've had, the lessons I've learned, and translate them into national DSA. Las Vegas DSA is truly one of the most positive, energetic, and uplifting spaces I've ever been, and I know that not everyone's chapter functions this way. I believe that we were able to accomplish this through positive leadership, solidarity, supporting one another, and giving our members the tools and resources necessary to organize in this space. Las Vegas DSA is still small with only 550 members, but I'd say that we tend to punch way above our weight. I want the opportunity to help do this with a membership of almost 100,000 socialists.
Thanks, Kara. That completes our interview with Kara Hall.